This is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be continuing my beginner chess opening series on the Slav Defense. So this is part 2, and I'm going to be covering a few of the other main lines that I didn't get a chance to hit in part 1, specifically with white developing the knights early to f3 and c3, and maybe either a bishop g5 line, or also bring the queen out to b3 early. So for the first game I've selected here, I've got Ibrahim versus Linsky in 2000, and I'll be taking a look at the opening. Black does employ kind of a weird move order, but he does end up transposing to the Slav Defense, this Schallopp variation with bishop f5 here. So c6, supporting the center, and so now e3. So bishop g5. This is an aggressive place to put the bishop, definitely a little bit more so than the early e3, and it doesn't seem to be terribly dangerous against this Schallopp variation of the Slav. Seems like black has got some good resources against it. So starting just simple development. When white takes in the center, you almost always want to take with the e pawn if you can. It's gonna give you the open e file later. And you also have some chances of using your majority on the queen side. So just taking, and so now bishop d3. And this move just really does make a lot of sense. On the one hand, the pawn structure says this light square bishop is white's good bishop. But, honestly, the bishop on f5 is so active that why not? It just makes sense to trade it off. And you're not really going to see people pursuing the bishop here, especially now, because they can just go back. And now, white really did want to put that knight on e5. So bishop here takes, and it also develops the queen. So it is a very logical plan by white. Bishop really does kind of belong on e7 just to break that pin right now. And so now we're in a situation where black might be having some problems developing, except he's got a great resource with knight to e4. So you really want to keep this trick in mind when you're playing the Slav. Really, it applies in a lot of different openings. This just jumping in with knight e4 because if he takes whatever, this is going to work out just fine for black. And also, if bishop takes is in the game, queen takes brings your queen further. One step kind of develops the queen, and you got this great knight on e4. So it really solves a lot of the developing problems. So knight d2, and just bring the knight back because it's very well placed on d6, where it's going to be controlling a lot of critical squares. So now f3 and just f5. And I think here, after rook e8 here, I think that black can comfortably say he's got a very good position out of the opening. Now, the plan to move forward, you could try to go for a tripling on the e-file. That seems just really logical. Try to pile up on that e3 pawn. And you could even try maybe lift the rook and go for a kingside attack. So definitely a lot of options that black can pursue there. And I think just coming out of the opening, this is just fine. Black is at least equal. So moving on, this is a game called Krupka versus Linsky. This is all the way from 1997, but it does show the opening ideas very nicely. So this is another way that that black can play against this bishop g5 line. The knights develop, and instead of playing e3, which was primarily covered in part 1 of this series, white is playing bishop g5. So bishop g5, again c6. And so bishop e7, slightly different move order. Last time we saw knight d7, but it seems like it's really going to transpose. Now bishop to d3, and a similar plan. White is employing a very similar plan. So after castles, in the last game we saw white play rook b1, trying to prepare b4. And after this, it was slightly different. Maybe if rook b1 here, you would take this pawn, and black would aim more to open the center, maybe even an immediate c5. For example, this wouldn't be very uncommon at all, or h6, for example. A lot of options. So instead, white captures, and here was where we saw rook b1 in the last game with knight to e4, and the tactic, where black just gets good activity, solves any opening problems. So instead, in this game, Krupka takes the knight on f6. And so now what this does, there's no kind of loose bishop on g5, so now he plays rook b1. And the difference is knight e4 just loses the pawn. So there's really no point, right? So kind of a nice, an interesting swap. He gives up the dark squared bishop, but now black is really trying to go, or white is trying to gain space. So one of the things you'll see a lot of times in the Slav defense, black trying to push these pawns, gain space on the queen side. And he almost always starts with a5. I've noticed studying a lot of games, you won't see b5 first. He'll wait as long as possible. A lot of times b5 won't be necessary. And also b5, you got to remember, you can't take pawn moves back. This is going to permanently weaken and make this c6 pawn a backwards pawn. It's just not going to be fun to defend for black for the rest of the game. So that's why you'll see a5 played first, and then b5 followed up if necessary. So this game is cool. It is similar with the bishop d3 that we saw in the first game, but the difference here, white played a little different move order, and white is really going for the queenside expansion, whereas in the last game, white was playing for f3 and e4. So now white is trying to shut down the queenside first, maybe fix that with a minority attack, transfer the knight, maybe going to c5. So here, black, bishop d6, so just putting it on a good square. Now queen e7, really just trying to stop b4 and centralize the pieces. The queen is very well placed as well. So now g3, probably just trying to stop any, I think if black played here, possibly white was trying to go for some type of Greek sack, or black was rather, in this. I don't think this really works here. It seems like it doesn't, but this maybe is not, this isn't very fun to play for white, I would imagine. So that's probably why I played g3, was to stop that idea. And now g6 by black, it looks kind of weird. Maybe he was trying to stop the knight coming in here, or we'll see what his idea really fit in nicely playing g6. So now he plays knight e4, and because he's already played g6, it's that much easier to just go ahead and play f5. It's already supported. So now queen c4, and here was really why I wanted to show this game, a4. And a4 was, you don't really feel the effect. I mean, yes, it does stop the b4 plan immediately, and if he does it, that's a3 is going to drop. I mean, that's going to be super weak. But a4, and the reason, rook a5. These kind of rook lifts, I love to play them. I mean, they're always so effective, very surprising to the opponent. And so he plays b4. Now he's ready to get the knight in and whatever. If takes, now white is going to start getting his activity at least. But black plays rook h5. So swinging the rook over to h5, just killing it. And so rook d1, and now queen d7. So he's trying to go for the attack, forces white's queen back, and now rook d5. So I'm going to stop going over this game right now because we're out of the opening. But I did think the idea with a5 to a4, then the rook lift to a5. What a cool idea. I mean, black here is undoubtedly, I think black's got a pretty serious positional advantage. I mean, look at white's knight compared to black's bishop. The rook on d5 is killing it. I mean, h5 and a nice kingside attack. It's just too easy to play white. So that's another nice way to play against that bishop d3 and trading and everything like that in the center. So moving on. This is going to be Gonzales versus Ortega, 1998. So another pretty old game, but definitely some relevant opening theory tips in here. So go ahead, c6. We got the Slav defense. You gotta back that pawn up. You don't want to play bishop f5 really. I mean, you can. This is a different opening. If knight takes, this is playable. This is acceptable, but it is a different opening. And I think maybe this guy maybe just doesn't seem very cool to me for black. So an easy way to avoid that is just play c6, and if takes, you just capture with the pawn. So knight c3, and so queen b3. So you see this idea pop up a lot against the Schallopp variation of the Slav defense, and it just makes sense. I mean, to me, the bishop moves. This opens up the attack on the weak pawn on b7. So queen b6, enticing c5, and you don't want to take the queen. You do not want to trade the queen. It opens up this rook, and I believe white, is really just going to go for b4. And black isn't really careful. White just plays b5 and just gets such a nice position. I mean, even b5 right here. And already I think we can say that white has a very nice position. There's also, let's just say white doesn't do that, and he plays a little bit different ideas or whatnot. White also has a really nice, long, more strategic positional plan of planning a knight on a5, where it's going to be massaging a lot of weak points. And you can even see some nice piece sacks in here. I played a couple times for white myself, where white manages to just sack a piece. Let's say right here, and maybe even like bishop takes. Bishop takes a6, for example. Takes, now knight takes. Black is just going to be killing it. I mean, you're going to get a couple pawns for the piece. White is just killing it, rather. I mean, this is just not very fun for black to play. I mean, maybe this exact piece sack here is not the best for white, although I still think, b5 maybe. I think that this is not. You need to be careful. It's an idea I wanted to introduce just to say, keep an eye out for that. So that's one of the reasons you don't want to take the queen on b3. So queen to c7. Now bishop f4. This may seem somewhat spectacular, but this is very mainline in opening theory. And this bishop f4, I mean, the idea is very simple. You can't take it. Queen takes b7, picking up the rook, and it just doesn't work. So queen c8. And the idea for black, even though you went out, enticed c5, bishop f4 was free, the queen all the way back to c8. 3 moves by the queen, right? And white, in the meantime, played queen b3 and c5 and developed the bishop. But the idea for black is that he's going to try to say this pawn on c5 is overextended, it's weak, and he's going to be trying to break the center, which is almost inevitable in this line with e5 in the future. Maybe knight e4, bishop e7 to f6 and e5. So black's plan is very easy. Plays h6 first, maybe making a little space for the bishop to get out of there. e6, bishop e7. Very simple plan. White goes back because he wants to roll the, he's just trying to steamroll the queen side. So a6, very important to insert this move, because if you don't, you're going to castle, b5, and now you're going to be left with these pawns, which favors white. Definitely because his bishop is controlling this rook, this square here on the b file. So let's say, either way, this file opens, and you can see that black is not going to be able to at least try to nullify white's pressure there. So, a6, very simple. After these moves, you just take, open the rook on the a file, problem solved. So a4, now knight e4, very, very common simplifying maneuver. It's not like you're trying to play passively or play for a draw with knight to e4. You're just trying to trade that knight off because the knights are kind of redundant here. I mean, they're fighting for the same square on e4. So trading one of those knights is only going to help black, and he does have less space in this position, so it makes a lot of sense to trade there. So now, maintaining the 2 bishops, and so here, I mean, pretty straightforward. After b5, you got to take it. Now bishop f6, and after e5, in this position, I'm going to stop checking this game out here because I think black is just fine. I mean, white does have a cramp on the queen side, but it's very difficult for him to exploit that. And meanwhile, black is going to be playing very actively in the king side and especially in the center. So I think here black is just fine. I mean, the pawns look scary for white, but I mean, you always have to protect this d pawn, right? And that's not that easy. I think the game continued something along this, and also there's the active rook on the a file. So definitely, I think black is just totally fine here. So moving on, I'm going to check out another plan because that is one of the most dangerous lines with that early queen to b3. This is definitely one of the most dangerous lines because the queen's putting pressure here, it's putting pressure on b7. You never want to play b6. This is a horrible move, and you can lose games in the opening because now you've weakened this diagonal so much. Sometimes the bishop posts up on a6, controlling the c8 square. Then the rooks just dominate the c file because black can't trade the rooks there. So b6, just don't do it. So queen b6, again c5, queen back, bishop f4. The same ideas. This is a very topical line, and I would definitely recommend my viewers to check out an absolutely insane game between Vladimir Kramnik and Alexei Shirov in this line, where Shirov tried to sack a ton of rooks. Anyway, continuing here, this is definitely a topical line. So knight d7, and now queen a4. So white is playing, he's trying to cheat a little bit with queen a4 and play for b4 quickly with the instant b5. So black here, very instructive, e6 first, a couple of different moves, nothing crazy. And as soon as b4 happens, because maybe now a6 and the queen is like in a good spot here to support this action on the queen side. So now b4, and this is why I wanted to show this game, very instructive, b5 by black. And b5 is just great because, you got to remember, white played a few moves to get this pawn up here. And if he takes now, he gives up his space advantage. Probably a takes. Now we got an open rook. And it seems like c5, black is doing great. This is as good as it gets in the opening and 13 moves. This is fantastic for black. So definitely something to remember. This queen on a4 really made this possible, but the blockading idea with b5, always something to remember in this line, especially where white has played this early c5. So queen went back, and now a5 immediately in this game. By the way, this is another game between Gonzales versus Ortega from '96. So a5 immediately here, and black has just got it all. The pawn on c6 is his weakness. That's the crutch of his position. But we know he's going to come in with knight e4, get this other knight, eliminate that pair of redundant knights. Just trading one knight, is going to solve the position a lot of the problems. Get the knight e4, probably bishop f6, and e5. The break on e5 is inevitable. So I'm not going to go too deep in this game here. But just, after queen b7, white is in trouble, because black was paying attention, played the opening very precisely, and just managed to put a ton of pressure here with queen a6. What else do you want out of the opening? Black is inevitably going to play knight e4, bishop f6, and e5. He's going to break that. For the time being, without that, even said, what's white's plan? It's very difficult for him to play for e4 himself, because of the weakness of the d4 pawn and the fact that black has got such domination on the a file. So an absolutely fantastic opening result here for black. So that does it for part 2 of the Slav Defense, the Schallopp Variation beginner chess opening series I'm working on. Part 3 is going to be going over the principal and most aggressive variations in the exchange variation. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.